Welcome to another edition of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you're used to. I'm Lenny McAllister, contributor with Red State, and as you can see, I am doing the show on location today in a secret underground bunker where, wait a minute, that's an intro from another conservative show, so I probably shouldn't use that one. But alas, there are three other conservatives here. This is kind of not secret. You can find me on GPS. And it's better to find these three folks than me. So I'm going to get to them. First, the lady of the show that gives me permission to do the show and allows me to say all the corny jokes that I want to, up to 1 hour total. Kira Davis, editor-at-large at Red State. Kira, hello once again.
Hi, Lenny. Good to be here.
That's all you got to say? That's it?
Yeah. Do you want more? I mean, you just complain about how much I talk every episode, and then I try to be a little, more concise, and now you want me to keep talking? I'll keep talking. Is that what you want? Is that what you want, Lenny?
You just complimented Jeff for 10 minutes before we started this show. You couldn't give me one compliment when I introduced you. So no, keep it to yourself for a second. Dude over there joining us today, Dr. Christopher Metzler, who, Kira, you see how she flusters me, Dr. M? Say hello to the people out there, please.
Hello, folks. How are you? Dr. Christopher Metzler, one of the old-time conservatives. I've been in the party a long time. Lord. Before many of these so-called newfound conservatives have come to the forefront. It's a pleasure for you all to let me into this show.
Well, it is. It is.
First of all, you got to understand what Dr. M did there. There was a lot of sly things there. It was a great way of him saying, I've been in the movement for a long time, but black don't crack. You notice he put that in there without actually saying it. First of all. Second of all, the dude down there, Jeff, I don't know if he was calling you out because he said, I've been here a long time before you newbies, and he kind of looked in your direction. So, Charles, the Breaking Conservatarian, do you have anything that you'd like to say to our guest who kind of called you out, also said that good black don't crack, and gave you the floor?
Well, I actually figured that him being on the show would mean that I'm not the youngest one for once, but maybe
Wow. First of all, Jeff, you forgot the rules. We go over this every single week before we start recording this show. The youngest person is always Kira, regardless.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I forgot that one. Yeah.
I am the youngest one. I have a freshman in college, but I had him when I was 9.
Oh, hey.
So, and you know what? And Kira, see, again, do you see how I threw you a bone, you see how this works in the intro?
Okay.
Show brother some love.
Okay, well, we'll see, Lenny. Let's just see how this show goes.
Ironically enough, she does truly treat me like her brother, because this is how my sister treats me. Not a whole lot of love, a whole lot of proverbially upside the head, but you know how that works. Anywho, speaking of people that have passed and that people were trying to play the waiting game out with, and God rest her soul, RBG passed away over this past week, and it's led to even more angst, as if there could be any more angst when it's come to 2020 in this election. And Kira, I'm going to go to you, then I'm going to go to the legal scholar, then I'm going to go down to Jeff. But I want to start with you first, Kira. We have yet another campaign issue to talk about, and you can see that the Democrats played this wrong. This was a woman, courageous life story, but she battled cancer multiple times. And in a lot of the stories that have come up, people have said she could have very easily bowed out when Obama was at the beginning of his second term to ensure that he was able to select a Supreme Court justice. I know they iced out that seat for months in 2016. They wouldn't have done it for 4 years. This seems to be, again, bad strategy on the part of Democrats in planning this out, and now we're getting the heartburn nationally as a result of it.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure that it was a Democrat decision, actually. RBG was a very strong-headed woman. She knew what she wanted. I think she really felt passionate about welcoming Hillary in. She kind of wanted to go out with the first female president. And if I agree or not, I get that. being in RBG's position. So I have no doubt in my mind that Obama encouraged her to retire. To me, that makes sense. I think Obama was, and every president would want a Supreme Court pick. So, but I think it was her gamble, and she gambled and she lost, and she's, God rest her soul. She's not here to see what the results of that are, but that was the gamble she took, and it didn't work out. And it was, as it turned out, it was a grave error. And yeah, it looks like Trump's going to get this pick, and he may yet have another one. This court may be the most conservative court we've ever seen in the history of Supreme Court, because it's really odd, isn't it? And I can't wait to hear what Chris has to say here, because Democrats have been really good at playing the long game for the last 50, 60 years. I mean, they've been fantastic at it. The Republicans have always had trouble keeping up with the long vision. Oh, it's almost like it just has disappeared from their eyesight now. They don't know how to play those long games anymore. And it looked like they took what they thought was going to be a short-term gamble, and now here we are. And who could have imagined any more fuel on this fire at this point? And here we are.
Dr. Metzler, you are a legal mind. This is part of the field that you delve into on a regular basis and spent much of your career in. Explain what's going on as far as the pick, but also explain what's the calculus behind not making the move 3 years earlier.
Well, it's interesting to me that Democrats have suddenly discovered the importance of the courts. Here's the thing, you remember when Obama was in office, there was a point in which he had control of the House and the Senate. He ignored the courts. And so he did not look forward to the opportunity to putting his justices on the court. It is why Trump had so many picks to begin with. In addition to which, he made a significant tactical error. You appoint Merrick Garland to the court. You want to have Merrick? Merrick was everybody's fifth choice and was never, ever nominated to the Supreme Court. If, in fact, Obama had the intestinal fortitude, what he would have done is nominated a Black woman to the court and then dared Republicans to vote against her. He didn't do that. But all of a sudden now, Democrats are so in love with the courts and are crying, oh, we don't get a chance to appoint because the court's never been important. Now you're like, oh, RGB is dead. So I don't know. Perhaps it's time to think about the court. Too late, too bad, so sad. The president picks the court. I just don't understand what's so complicated about that. More importantly, Obama was supposed to be a constitutional law professor. Yeah, okay.
But all valid points, and Chris and Jeff, I'm going to get to you on this. More importantly, President Obama seemed to miss the opportunity to lead a generation of political figures as well as legal minds. I mean, Donald Trump, who is the guy that if you do the studies in 2016, they broke down sentence structure, and they said that Donald Trump spoke at the simplest sentence structure out of any presidential candidate over the last 100 years. And yet this guy is probably going to have most of his fingerprints on the legal landscape more than any other president, perhaps over the last 100 years. And I won't say that so much because of Trump per se, Jeff. I'm going to say in large part because President Obama in 2009 had a supermajority and decided that the one thing he's going to do is not heal the racial divide, because he told Eric Holder to shut up when Eric Holder brought it up in February of 2009, not try to make sure people got back to work within a quick period of time, even with the bailouts. The first thing he primarily focused on was Obamacare. That's where all the political capital got spent over the course of the year and a half that he had the supermajority. Then he lost Massachusetts with Scott Brown, and then he lost the House in 2010, and then by 2014 he lost the Senate, and he squandered all the political capital. And then now we start with 2017 on through, we also see that he could have controlled the Supreme Court and he didn't. Jeff, I know people will say that I'm reaching, but if you take a little bit of recent American history, can't you make the case that Trump's gain was very much how Obama let it slip through his fingers as well?
Yes, I don't think it's that much of a stretch at all, Lenny. I mean, I think that he's the reason he spent a lot of that political capital is because the Democrats probably supported him in doing it.
Yep.
They were willing to make certain sacrifices if they were to get the next step towards single-payer health care through, and that's what Obamacare is. It was the next step towards that type of system.
Mm-hmm.
That dream was never going to be realized under him, but he was able to take that first step. So they were willing to lose the House and then the Senate. As a matter of fact, I saw some Democrats talking about how they knew that that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, to me, it just sounds more like it was overconfident. I mean, they had a Supreme Court that actually allowed Obamacare. So I don't think that he really was focused on the courts, because I think that he was more focused on Obamacare and dealing with whatever issues that he was dealing with as well. Also, the foreign policy that we got into as far as Libya and other entanglements that we got into overseas. So honestly, I think that I think that if he could do it again, he probably would have done it differently. But I think that this was a rare mistake on the part of the Democrats, because usually, like Kira said, they don't make mistakes like this very often. They didn't play the long-term game when it came to the Supreme Court, and now it's going to cost them no matter what they say.
So can I say something here, Lenny, really quick?
You can't say it without me saying that Jeff used the words entanglements and mentioned somebody getting screwed without mentioning Will Smith or Jada.
I was thinking it.
But I digress. Go,
Kira. This whole thing about people not playing the long game, you know, it reminds me, recently I rewatched 30 Rock. Used to be my favorite show. It's Tina Fey show. It's a spin on SNL. And I recently rewatched the entire 7 seasons or 8 seasons. One of the last seasons took place during Obama's historic 2008 run. And the whole season was basically about that run, right? And as I'm watching it, they do this episode where the studio is telling them, you need to run more red meat, red, white, and blue stuff, because those are the people in the country that we need to get. They don't like that you're so liberal. And by the end of it, Tina Fey's character is like, no, screw this. She does this whole monologue where she goes, screw this. You guys lost. We have Obama now. Things are different. This whole country is different, and we're never going back to the way it was. And that was the moment. Mm-hmm. It was like I stood up. I said, I got it. I know when we got Trump, and it was this very moment here. They actually sincerely believed that U.S. politics would never cycle back around. They really believed that. So I think that's exactly what Jeff has just said here. That's exactly what he's pointed out, that they were just arrogant enough to believe that we were never going to go through another cycle.
But that's a lack of vision, is it not, Dr. M? You've been in the game for a while. And if you're going to be a generational figure, you have an obligation to think about 20 years, even as you're dealing with the next 20 minutes. And they seem to have forgotten about that once they got through the pomp and circumstance of November, December, and the inauguration of the first African-American president. I had mentioned in February 2009 that the time for even racial healing would have been that first Black History Month with Obama in place. They basically did nothing even then. So it was literally like, okay, we want to ride the wave of history until we put up our hand and mess up the oath like he did. And then from there, just go do like we did. I say oftentimes that he ended up becoming a Chicago politician rather than being that transformative particular character in history that said, okay, I'm going to shape this in my image. And they try to compare him to Reagan. They try to compare him to FDR. But if you look at what FDR did in 1933, he got it in a way that Obama simply didn't.
No, and you're absolutely right. Listen, for Obama, the thing was this. His thing is, I am the first Black president, therefore I am. He surrounded himself with a number of politicians, a number of sycophants who essentially went into the White House and pushed that agenda. that is exactly what he did. So rather than be concerned about the country, rather than being concerned about legacy, he was concerned about himself. And when you got to Obamacare, his thing was, oh yeah, it's Obamacare. It's my namesake. No, actually, it's an albatross around your neck. And so as a result of that, rather than leading and rather than governing, and you looked at some of the folks who worked with him and who were advising him, I was like, what kind of babble are you talking about? Do you really expect America to believe that and to be that way? And that is the problem that we had relative to that administration. And in fact, Obama set the table for Trump by his arrogance, by his failure to really understand policy, and his failure to be transformational. To him, what was transformational was the fact that he is the Black president. Well, being the first Black president will, I think at this point, that and probably 10 cents wouldn't even get you a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. And so as a result of that, we end up in this situation. So Democrats, liberals, they can cry all they want, but they deserve what they got because their leadership failed miserably.
So, Kara, let me ask you this question. When does Justice Candace Owens get confirmed by the Senate?
That would be, is there a minimum age? Do you have to be a certain age to be on
I'd
SCOTUS?
like to think that a law degree would be somewhere in the mix in there as well.
No, you don't need a law degree.
You do not. Supreme Court.
You know what? By the way, in all seriousness, my suggestion is they stop nominating lawyers to the Supreme Court. We don't need them to be lawyers. There's too many lawyers on the Supreme Court. So to be totally serious, I don't know that I would hate a Candace Owens on the Supreme Court, but to answer your question, probably never.
Jeff, so with that said, we know this list is coming. We know that we're basically under 45 days before the election, except in Pennsylvania, where you literally can mail in your ballot 3 days after Election Day, which is a whole different story that we can talk about another time. But with that said, what does this process look like for America 4 years after Obama's nomination was held up for months? What's that going to do to us culturally when this list comes out, when the vetting process starts, and we see it be, fast streamed when it was slowed down and iced just 4 years ago? What's that going to mean for us as a society moving forward towards this election through a pandemic, racial division, and everything else? And we'll get to some of the racial divisiveness after this.
What I'm going to say is that we need to go ahead and bring out the clowns, the elephants, the lions, the tigers, the bears, the horses, the big top, the tent, because this is going to be the biggest circus that we've ever seen. And that's me putting it lightly. There's some stronger language I can use here that I'm not going to use, but it's going to be nuts. I mean, look at how wild they went, over Kavanaugh. I mean, and that even was really just a hint of what every single appointment is going to look like if Trump gets reelected, because he might be able to fill other seats as well, and they're going to go crazy. And they're already talking about what they're going to do to try to stall the confirmation progress. They're talking about doing another impeachment fiasco. They're talking about other ways that they can kind of derail it. They're going to fail, but it all depends on who he picks. I mean, if he picks Amy Coney Barrett, he takes a lot of attacks away from them that they could use. I mean, if it's a man, they could just have somebody pretend that he sexually harassed them 10, 20 years ago. They can't do that with Amy Coney Barrett. And they're already using the attacks, and the most that they have is just having women talk about The Handmaid's Tale. They're so obsessed. Why are they so obsessed with that movie, by the way? or not movie, the show. Why are they so obsessed with it? Is it great? It's
their utopia. That's the thing. It's projection. That is actually their utopia. They would love it because the elite have absolute control over the unwashed masses. They get to decide when babies come into the world.
Right.
And it's their vision of utopia.
Well, it all depends based on what they want and how they want and who they want to do what. And that kind of goes over to Breonna Taylor, because everybody wants to blame the Republican AG of Kentucky when, in fact, once again, you have another police misconduct issue in a region that's run by Democrats. And now, once again, you see the streets being filled with protesters. Now, I'm not trying to make it seem as though this stuff only happens under Democrats, but Kira, I want to go to you first because you were talking about utopia. You're seeing more and more protesters frustrated with everybody. Democrats, Republicans, they don't care. They're frustrated with America and they're looking for a better way of life, but they don't know how to get that. What do you think we're going to learn as a society from this Breonna Taylor situation that may shift us culturally and, dare I say, from a policy and politics perspective as well?
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing, because I'll tell you what, the Breonna Taylor case, I actually have not been really focused on. I mean, the other cases I have, but this one I was like, I'll leave it to my intellectual betters. I've been surface level following the case, but I haven't been deep diving into it. So I'll tell you what, when I found out this week that there was no knock warrant, I was like, what the hell have we been talking about for the last 6 months? This is the only thing in this whole conversation I was thinking, oh, I can get on board with this. I don't know the ins and outs of this case, but I feel like that's something I could get on board with. Get rid of no knock warrants. Great. This wasn't even about that. This is another case of social media and the media making something into a life or death struggle that it seems that is way more complicated. And what they do is they simplify, not to say that there's no injustice here. That's not what I mean. What I mean is they simplify all the details of the case. So it's like, here's a murderer, it's a white guy. Here's a victim, innocent victim, it's a black woman. And then if this white guy doesn't go to jail for murder, then the system's racist. But listen, I've been a juror, and I know what it's like to sit on a jury. It's not black and white. It's not that easy. These lawyers, you have all these considerations to make. You have to consider the letter of the law. You take an oath on the Bible when you sit on that jury. And it might sound like nothing when we just talk about it, but when you're in that room and when you're in the courtroom, people take it very seriously. And I just did a criminal theft case, and even the most concrete details of that we argued about incessantly, about the letter of the law. What does this mean? What does that mean? Is this technically theft? Is this technically, the guy jumped over a fence and broke into a lady's house, but people are saying, well, did he jump over the fence, or did he just like stumble over the fence because he was drunk? It just makes, there are so many little things that happen in the jury box amongst the jurors. It is absolutely irresponsible. This is the same reason why the Trayvon Martin case got blown way out of proportion. It was a terrible case, but then the AG posted these charges that they could never have met. They never could have prosecuted him on the charges. And no one understood the case. All anyone understood was the social media involved in the case. And that made everyone angrier, because when the results weren't, hey, you bad and you good, then everyone exploded. So Kira, nothing.
Kira and Dr. M, I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to bounce back to the other two as well. Why are we not learning from these examples? You brought up Trayvon Martin, and people don't realize that Trayvon Martin was almost 10 years ago. Ferguson was over 5 years ago. Why are we not learning these lessons and I'll go to the legal scholar first, from a legal perspective, a cultural perspective, a policy perspective, a racial perspective? Why are we not learning the lesson in 2020 that seems to have been out there for us to learn in 2012 and Ferguson 2014, 2015, specifically and particularly with a black president, which one would think would be a lot easier to have these conversations with versus the divisive rhetoric that sometimes obviously comes from the White House now? Why haven't we learned these lessons yet?
Well, because look, as a former prosecutor, let me say this. First of all, there is an obsession with overcharging. Every time one of these cases come up, oh, they must be charged with first-degree murder. No, absolutely not. As the prosecutor, if I can't prove that, I am not going to go forward with that. So that's one.
Are those Dr. M, are those social media charges in essence, because maybe they didn't happen 20 years ago?
Yeah, they're social media charges. And you've got these people, oh, well, there was malice aforethought First of all, you don't even know what that means. So stop talking about it. Okay? That's the first thing we have. And then secondly, when you are in that prosecutor's chair, look, I am not going to take a case I can't win. If as the prosecutor, I know I am not going to be able to convince the jury, I'm not going to do it. And that's the thing that folks need to understand. They need to understand how the criminal justice system works, rather than simply saying, in this criminal justice system, there is no justice for Black people. What does that mean? If you are talking about reforming the system, it is important that you first understand how it works. Overcharging 98% of the time results in acquittal because you cannot meet the burden of proof. But, on social media, everybody's a lawyer and they all have their, oh yeah, and he was there and he pointed the gun. How do you know? You don't know what the prosecutors have. And I think particularly as it related to the Obama administration, they were not concerned really with justice. They were more concerned about how do we look in so-called protecting the lives of Black people. Garbage, because at the end of the day, that's not what you did.
Well, and Chris, I'm going to go over to Jeff now, because Jeff, it seems as though, and I want to leverage all three of you on this. It seems very evident to me, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but the strategies that were used during the civil rights movement of the 20th century that brought a lot of the successes and chipped away at things that were as rigid as Jim Crow in the South seem to be abandoned right now, where people don't understand how to stack victories, whether it's in the courts or whether it's culturally or whether it's economically, in order to get the substantive change that they're looking for. Jeff, am I missing the point, or am I just glamorizing what happened in the 50s and the 60s in a way that maybe just can't work in the 21st century?
I think in this day and age, we have so many different ways to communicate right now. We have so many different ways that different messages are getting to us that it really muddies the issue. And I'm glad that Dr. Metzler brought up the issue of overcharging, because from day one of this case, I was thinking they're probably going to get off, because I don't know how they prove murder or second degree or manslaughter. And I'm not a lawyer, but from what I can tell, the Trayvon Martin case, and Dr. Metzler can correct me if I'm wrong, the mistake there was that they charged them with something that they couldn't possibly prove.
Absolutely.
Maybe, yeah, they may have been able to get manslaughter, maybe, but murder, they have to prove that he went into that situation with the intent to kill Trayvon, and I didn't see that there, and I didn't see that here. So with the way our legal system works, you got the people who call instantly for first-degree murder are doing the family a disservice. They're doing society disservice. They're doing the victims a disservice, because if they push for something like that, you run the risk of overcharging. I'm concerned about that even in the George Floyd case.
Yes.
I'm concerned that there could be some overcharging there as well, which means that there will be no accountability, no justice, and the ones who are really driving this I hate to be partisan, but I'm sorry, it's the left. It's the left that drives that narrative.
Yeah.
Every single time something like that happens, they push for first-degree murder or second-degree murder without even knowing the details of the case, if it would even support that. My thing is, would you rather them be charged with something that they can actually get convicted for, or do you just want to feel good about saying, oh, this is first-degree murder, look how great of a person I am?
Okay, and Kara, you first, and everybody else can jump in. But isn't there an issue where we as Black people know that the criminal justice system deals with Black people differently? It deals with Black victims differently. It adjudicates justice based on who's the victim, who's the perpetrator, differently based on race. And we've seen that over the years, and there's been study after study after study after study. So we cannot necessarily refute that. But when you start talking about cases such as this, how are there ways to close the gap between what we've experienced and what we have seen in studies versus what we're seeing in a high-profile case like this, Kara? Is there any way to close that gap? And if there's not, then how do you get to a true sense of equality for citizens when it comes to the criminal justice system moving forward?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. 10 years, oh my gosh. 10 years since Trayvon Martin was murdered.
The 2012, very close, yes.
Oh my gosh, George Zimmerman deserved to go to prison for that, but it was such a gross overcharging that it was never going to work. And that was 10 years ago, and we have not learned our lesson. And it is because it's the politics. It's the politics that gets into all of it. So here on Red and Black, we can have these long form discussions and we can hash things out. But Nancy Pelosi gets 30 seconds or a minute on CNN to make a point to get people out to vote. And so if her point is, look, if you vote for Donald Trump, Black men are going to get murdered, shot in the head every time they step out their house by a police officer. You know, that's all they have time for. So they got to get the base riled up. And too many of us don't want information. Too many of us don't care. I was saying on my podcast today, I was telling the story about a family member of mine who one day we have very different politics. One day she posted something on Facebook and I knew it was wrong. Like I knew it was one of those things where it was like, oh no, this was redacted 5 minutes after the New York Times put it in. So I didn't want to pontificate, but I just dropped in and I said, hey, I thought you'd like to know this actually was redacted. It's not real. And she said, I don't care. She said, it's on the internet. So she was like, the point is, she was like, I really don't care. And you know what?
At least she was honest about it.
Yeah.
It was a very freeing moment for me because that was the moment that I realized, oh, people don't want to be educated. She didn't want to be educated. She didn't want to hear my truth. She wanted to see the facts. That wasn't what she was posting it for. She had emotions. She wanted to express those emotions, and this is how it came out. So unfortunately, I don't know how we close this gap because too many people just want to be emotional, and we can't really look at facts and information.
And that is interesting.
And to add to that really quick, there are people with positions of influence, they are high profile, who have a vested interest in making sure that we don't close that gap.
Yeah.
So they want to make sure that we're receiving those messages that aren't necessarily true, but they gin up outrage or they promote virtue signaling or what have you. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to close that gap when there are people in powerful positions who are working against that.
Mm-hmm. And
good, Doctor.
I think we have to divorce politics and justice. See, this is the issue. What ends up happening is we are not concerned about justice and outcome. What we are concerned about is politically, and don't even get me started on Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. I am not a fan of the organization Black Lives Matter. When you come out and tell me that you are a trained Marxist and you're going to burn my city down, and not to mention the fact that Black Lives Matter, however, you're so closely assigned with Planned Parenthood, but that's a whole other conversation.
Or that the two-parent construct is a right idea.
Yeah.
Right.
We've got to dismantle the nuclear family.
Yeah. Oh, they took that off their website, though, so it doesn't count anymore.
Right.
Sorry.
It no longer exists.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about this because one of the things that all four of us on the show have done over the years, including the guy with Good Black Don't Crack, who's been doing it longer than all of us, is the fact that we have to go on liberal-leaning media outlets or just flat out all the way to the left outlets and still try to give not necessarily a conservative voice, but give a balanced voice that may come through our conservative values, but at least it's fair and it's different. It's a different perspective. Jeff, I'm going to talk to you first because you probably did it the latest when you were on Fox Soul last week, but I'm going to bounce it around all four of us today because all of us do this on a fairly regular basis. Jeff, how was your experience? But more importantly, do you feel like you got some traction with being there? Because if we're going to fight back and forth like this, is it really moving the ball forward, being Black conservatives, having these type of conversations and begging people to please turn their brains back on as we're moving through 2020?
Yes, it is. Not only is it worth it, but it is necessary. People need to hear different voices. Black people are not a monolith. And my experience on Fox Soul was great. Like I had a blast. I loved it. And everybody was really nice. Even the people who disagreed with me strongly were very nice
You know
to
they're
me
not paying.
during the break.
You know they're not paying you right, Jeff. So you can really.
Not yet. Not yet.
But go ahead.
No, yeah, the experience was awesome, and for me, I mean, as a Black conservative in the media who has a more of a following than I did before, most of my audience is conservative. So a lot of times I'm preaching to the choir. So when I'm preaching to that choir, I'm telling them the things that they're not hearing. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to be a Black conservative in the media, what's the point if I'm not actually trying to talk to Black people? So being on Fox Soul was basically my first time in a format where I can go head to head with Democrats, challenge their ideas, have them challenge mine, point out the flaws in their thinking, and be civil while I'm doing it. And I mean, if I could do that even more often than being on conservative stuff, other than Red and Black, then I would.
Oh, thank you.
Very smart, Jeff. Good job. Very smart, Kira, go ahead, because you saw he put it out there well, and you can compliment me while you answer this time, Kira.
No, I agree with Jeff. My podcast, Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis, available wherever you get your podcasts. I have had the opportunity to put that thing. We need like a sound effect whenever we hub ourselves.
I just did that.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Lenny, for your very precise sound effect.
We're low tech here. Sorry, folks.
You're like that. What's the guy from Remember the Police Academy movies that did all the impressions?
Yeah, exactly. Except I'm just not good at it. But we digress.
Right. Well, you're getting better. Also, I just totally aged myself. Yes, Police Academy. I literally just referred to Police Academy movies for 40 years ago.
I remember that.
Anyway.
Oh, I remember that.
But you already established yourself as old up there, so you keep to yourself. Let the lady
anyway, what I was saying is that I had the opportunity to take that show to conservative networks, but I chose not to. I chose an inner city platform, not an inner city platform, I should say an urban platform, and Black-owned network out of Cleveland, fledgling. I chose them because I wanted to build a new audience. I didn't want to preach to the choir. I have outlets where I do preach to the choir. Nothing wrong with the choir. You guys sound beautiful. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But since I've been in this, see, I'm a converted liberal. I'm a converted atheist. Like, I really believe in the power of persuasion.
And she's a converted American, folks, because
yeah, I'm a converted American. You know, I was a Canadian and now I'm an American, and I mean, I believe in the power of persuasion, and I want to. I'm a conservative because I love Black people. That's what made me a conservative. I was living with Black people, serving Black people, seeing how these policies I always supported worked, realized they didn't, and I thought I don't want this for us. We can do better. So I do believe that people like Jeff and all of us, like, we belong trying to get out there and get our voices out there. And kudos to Fox Soul for at least opening the door. It's not always comfortable. You're usually outnumbered. They all usually come to the table with a bunch of judgments about you. But I wholeheartedly believe when you approach every discussion with grace, and when you lead with grace, and when you also feel confident in what you believe, so you're not feeling desperate that you got to convince everybody. I truly believe that is the base of persuasion, and it takes time. I want to persuade people because I think I'm right, and I want to persuade people that I am.
But is it working, Dr. Metzler? Sure. Is it working over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Is it really moving the needle with Black voters, with Black constituents?
Well, I think that it is working in part. And here's why I say in part. We have recently gotten on the Black conservative bandwagon a number of people who are not conservative, Republican, they are opportunists. And as a result of that, if you want Black folks to understand the importance and relevance of conservatism to us, you do not start off by attacking them and telling them how stupid they are and how ignorant they are. There are a number of folks who wear the conservative title who are, quite frankly, grifters. And as a result of that, we have ended up having to not only defend being Black and conservative, we also now have to clearly identify that we're not grifters. And so I think this intervention gives us more of a challenge, but I do think it's working. I think, we have our challenges. We have our, as in anything else, is conservatism perfect? No, it is not perfect. But for Black folks, if you look at the economic, if you look at the family, if you look at all of those things, it is the appropriate match. I think, however, we have to be more inviting with that invitation. It is not about shunning or judging Black people. It is about making the case. If we can't make the case without insulting people, then we have no case to make.
Okay, but do we need, is this not going to get to the next level of this? If this is working and going on the liberal outlets and everything else and going through some of the back and forth that we've gone through. I mean, Jeff, I know you went through some stuff on Fox Soul, on social media. I know you two have gone through stuff. I had a piece that was out in NPR this past week, which led to people criticizing me on both sides because I was both not conservative enough and obviously not liberal enough. So if it's still working, what's the next level? Is it going to be seeing more Black conservatives in office? Is it going to be seeing more Black conservatives in media? What takes it to the next level where you start seeing chunks of inner cities, such as having Shannon Wright run for mayor in Baltimore, or some of the other people that you're seeing in high office or running for high office? Is it going to take that, or is it just going to take a concerted effort where you have 4 Larry Elders instead of just one? What's going to move the needle to that next significant level? Starting with you, Karen, we'll go around from there.
It's a simple answer: red and black.
Really, I like that answer.
Hold on, there's not a check.
I like this guy.
You could say that as much as you want for the next 20 minutes, but nobody's paying you.
Yeah, they don't have to, because this is really where it is. Look, if we're going to sit here, I mean, it's a combination of electing folks. If we expect that any of the major networks are going to do it for us, it ain't going to happen.
No.
So red and black this is part of the equation. This is part of how we solve for X. And that's frankly what it is.
So hold on, before I go to Kira, I'm going to ask you that question again, Dr. Metzler, after our next topic, and I want to see if your answer is still the same.
Okay.
How do we move this needle? Is that what the question is? How do we move? How do we make?
Yes.
I'm not smart enough to know. All I know is I think what Chris just said is it probably lands exactly where I would. Just we have to push forward. We were talking a little bit off air before we started recording, and I was telling them, I had this really big revelation. I had a real nasty blow up with my old podcast network, and I was the only minority on there, and they fired me. And I was really pissed off, and I thought, how they talk about race all the time, and they don't have any Black people on their network. And I looked at my own blog and I saw the same thing. It was just me. And I finally realized, you know what? No one's going to do this for us. No one's going to give this to us. And not necessarily because everyone's a racist, but because perspective is everything. Some people just don't think about it. You don't think about going out and actually finding Black people to write at your site, to make videos for you, to actively recruit, because that is not your perspective. But I, as a Black woman looking around me and feeling lonely that there's not people like me around, I'm likely to notice that more. And I say this a lot to white organizations that are looking to hire. Start with one, and then you tell that person, I need you to recruit from your circle. And tell me, you send me things that people like. I can't see all the things you see, and there's nothing wrong with saying that. So I think moving the needle and getting to the next level really is going to be all about us doing for ourselves. And this is really my problem with how the left frames Black issues right now, because we're always looking to white folks to fix it.
Yes.
And I don't know why we would look at the people who broke it to fix it.
Yes.
At some point, there are some things, because if you're in a position of power, I get it. There are some things you got to change. But I would say 90% of the stuff that Black folks need to do needs to happen in-house.
Mhm.
And we're always being told it's not our fault. There's nothing we can do. We are powerless to change ourselves or shift our communities. We got to look to other people, look to the great white savior to do it. No one's going to do it for us. We've always lived our lives this way, from slavery through Jim Crow to the 60s. We've always just taken the reins and run with it, or to hip hop culture, run with it ourselves. And we're not going to wait for someone to let us in the door. We got to bust down the door ourselves.
But let's go to this real quick, Jeff. But there's something to be said about, and Dr. Metzler touched upon it earlier. There needs to be a certain skill set that's not always there. And it's not just how you say it or not insulting Black folks. It's literally, and I say this often, not a lot of conservatives actually understand their conservatism, let alone be able to translate it to different communities. There's a skill set that's often overlooked, Jeff, and you do it well. Kira does it brilliantly on Just Listen to Yourself. Dr. Metzler's been doing it for decades. Can you talk a little bit about the skill set that you're seeing yourself grow into? Because you do it very well as well. But there are some that are out there that have the big Twitter platforms and the like that don't quite do it as a skill set, and it's overlooked. It definitely is a skill set. You can't just have the megaphone. You got to also have the platform, and you got to be able to say it the right way.
Yes, I mean, it is all about communication and communicating the right way. And I think that, I mean, Dr. Metzler touched on it. There are a lot of people who are opportunistic and they're not really conservative. So if they don't really understand their own conservatism, then they can't speak to the Black community about how conservatism can benefit them on a deeper level.
Yes.
But I will even go even further. I don't think that we should underestimate the fact that people like us exist, and now we have more of a voice than we did before through social media, through alternative media. I can't tell you how many times I'll get a comment from a Black Democrat who comments on something that I say or somebody that I know says basically in no uncertain terms, I did not know that there were Black conservatives who actually like Black people.
Right.
I did not know that there were Black conservatives who don't hate Black people. And I chuckle at it, but at the same time, that's really sad that they even have to say that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to show the people on Fox Soul is that, when you have me on your show, you're not getting somebody who's going to come at you with just the conservative talking points. I'm gonna come at it with nuance. You may not agree with me, but you won't doubt the fact that I want the best for the Black community. Deontay Johnson was on with me, same with him. So I think that as more of us get out there, and as people on that are voting on the left, when they see more of that, then it'll kind of tweak their curiosity. It's still going to take time because there's still a lot of that influence on the right that pushes Black people away. But communication is the key, being able to argue your ideas in a way that still shows that you respect the people that you're speaking to. For some people, it's hard, and for others, it's not. And for others, they can do it, but they just choose not to because that's not where the money is. But I think as more of us get out here, more red and blacks, more of us get out there and start doing what we're doing right now, I think it's going to move the needle.
You know what? There's moving the needle, and then there's getting booties to the poll. Now, I know that on Red and Black, we're all about moving the needle. But there's a group of folks that put together a PSA that are more concerned about getting booties to the polls by trying to push certain buttons. Now, I'm walking through this carefully before we end the show because we have talked about Magic City. We have talked about Terry Cruz's adversarial relationship with Magic City. We have talked about Kira's misdefinition of Magic City. I have made entendres about people's wands being magically whatever because of Magic City. And now we have a genuine PSA where there are people on a poll trying to persuade people to go to the polls by way of their booty to get other people to get their booty to the polls. Now, I would never find a story like this. No. I'm a Catholic boy. However, the heathen from California, I won't put no names out there because I love her, brought this story to our attention. So, Kira, please explain how and why only in 2020 could this actually be a PSA?
Yeah, what you're referring to, Lenny, is a PSA. I'm not sure who put it out, but what it is a PSA aimed at young and Black voters, and it's using strippers.
Young and Black men voters.
Young Black male voters, and it's using strippers, and they're talking about get your booties to the poll. I don't know if you have the link, Lenny, if you'll put that up, but
Yeah,
no, I don't got the link, Kira. What is wrong with you?
it was good art. It was like very artistic.
I'm glad you as a producer can say that. Me as a husband cannot. Continue.
Well, I'll tell you what. When I saw it, I said to myself, "Oh, this is a parody. This is one of those things that SNL did to like get conservatives all riled up." And I was about to go nuclear on conservatives for falling for yet another parody that's making fun of their hangups. But then I went to watch the whole thing, and I'm like, "Oh no, this is real. This is a real ad
with a real website." And real voter registration instructions.
Listen, I can't speak to how it speaks to men, but as a woman, I saw that and I thought two things. I thought, wow, these strippers are actually way more well-spoken than I would have given them credit for.
They got to work their way through college. Keep going.
Right, they're paying for their degrees, their doctorates. But the other thing I thought was, and this kind of goes in line with how we started out this show, I realized like, wow, the disconnect between the Democrat Party elites and their base, well, what used to be their base, which is Black people, and now
there's a lot of base in that video.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
It's amazing. Carol, you're done talking. Before we go, it's amazing how you said nothing over there, Jeff Charles. You were quiet, didn't want to say a word, and then base and booty got said too many times, and you couldn't help yourself. So go ahead and say something. Make another joke. Have fun with it, Mr. Charles. Go right ahead.
I'm just saying. I saw that, and the first thought was like, maybe Biden isn't that bad. They converted me for how long was that video? About 3 minutes? Yeah, they converted me for about 3 minutes. If election day were today, or the day that I saw it, and I went to the polls, I would have voted for Biden. I would have voted Democrat down ticket, the whole thing.
First of all, you the one that was coming on here talking about, Kamala's fine. We won't even go back and replay that. See, there you go.
They already got her.
Number two, and I'm going to take this over to Dr. Metzler because I'm going to put the vision in his mind. We don't want to see certain candidates back that thing up. And one of those folks is definitely Joe Biden. Can you pontificate upon Biden backing that thing up to get booties to the polls, Dr. Metzler?
Well,
you're legal to say no less.
First of all, any thought of Biden backing anything up instantly makes me want to throw up. So we've got that. Secondly, however, I wondered secretly whether or not Cardi B had actually produced that video because of WAP.
It's actually not that crazy of an idea.
It always goes back to Cardi B and Candace. Do you see how this works?
Mm-hmm.
You missed it.
I don't know how anything works anymore, Lenny. Here.
Yeah. Oh, look. Can somebody please talk? Dr. Metzler on the mic, talk about your podcast before we go, before somebody else brings up something else about somebody else getting undressed, please.
So Metzler on the mic is my podcast. You find it wherever you get your favorite podcast. And Lenny's already been on the show. So Kara, Jeff, I'm going to be hounding y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking is my favorite thing. Anytime.
Kara,
thank you.
Just listen to yourself. Talk about your fantastic podcast real quick before we go.
Just Listen to Yourself with Kira Davis is the podcast where I take hot topics, hot button issues each week, and I discuss their talking points and I draw each one out to their logical conclusion. because I believe that when people actually take the time to listen to what they're saying, sometimes we're not saying exactly what we think we are. So it's an exercise in critical thinking. It's an exercise in persuasion. This week, I think my biggest episode ever, which is still gaining thousands of clicks each week, was my episode on Black Lives Matter. The difference between the institution and the notion. But this week, I think is going to be a really great episode. You guys are going to want to go listen, because I have been getting all kinds of questions from people. How do I talk to my relatives that I'm very contentious with, politically speaking, about politics? You know, we're getting into the heat of the season, the heat of the cycle. And so I give some tips and advice for how to talk to people who are your ideological opposition about politics without it devolving into insanity. So I think it's one that you guys are going to enjoy this week. Go download it wherever you find your podcasts. And also, before I go, I want to tell you about this film that I've been involved in. It's called Small Group. It's a Christian movie. I was out in Georgia last weekend to film some marketing things for them, but you can go to smallgroupthemovie.com and you can find a DVD. It's a comedy about your church small group, and I loved it because if you've been in a church Bible study or small group, you know every person in this film. So, and I'm really proud to be involved with it, and just to be a person of faith and to get a piece of art, to get film made. That in itself is an accomplishment. So I'm thrilled to be a part of it. It's called Small Group, the movie. Go look it up and go download it in support of this filmmaker.
And of course, you can find the Kira Davis Show on Red State. You can also find her articles on Red State. Breaking Conservatarian, break it to us very quickly before we get out of here. We're running out of time.
Yeah, you can look up Breaking Conservatarian on youtube.com. That's my YouTube channel. It's also a podcast, so you can download that at Spotify and on iTunes. I will be uploading a video about my experience with the Black Lives Matter protest from last night. And I'm actually going to be starting a new series, a new audio-only series that I'll let you know when I get closer to it, but it's going to be good stuff.
Fantastic. Also find his stuff as well. Red State, he is out there. Also catch up to his Fox Soul episode from last Friday night. Make sure you download that. Check that. That's foxsoul.tv. I do believe it is. Kira's all over the place. Of course, you can find my stuff on Red State. I had an article on NPR. I had an article, been doing stuff with KDK. There's a lot of things to talk about, and that's why we do Red and Black, for us to talk, for us to share, to see different perspectives. Thanks once again to Dr. Christopher Metzler, who had to leave the show just a little bit early, but we appreciate him coming there. I also did my podcast with Shermichael Singleton and Antonia Okafor. That's out now. Catch that. In the meanwhile, we're continuing the conversation going. We're trying our very, very best to make sure that we're understanding the issues that are out there, but also talking about solutions. So again, Dr. Metzler, thank you. Jeff Charles, thank you. That person that gives me...
Oh, thank you so much for being with us, friends.
Don't be friendly now, Kira. You've already spent an hour just giving everybody the business. Anywho, you know we love you. You know we love each other. We love America. Let's make our country better each and every day because we're working together. In the meanwhile, you know we love you. We'll talk to you again next week. TCNGB, take care and God bless. Peace.